It must have been 1983, 1984. I was in my 6th year of a quite fast rise through one of the 3 largest computer corporations in the world. Burroughs Corporation became Unisys years later. And I was sort of tricked into taking an assignment that was easily among the most important in the division I was in. No one else would take it. No one else could take it. They didn't have the qualifications. And I wasn't told what was going on. Replacing the computers, one vendor competitively replacing another, was and is almost unheard of. It's such a monumental task. And yet Burroughs had won the contract, which I knew, a very large contract, to replace all the Sperry computer systems at Fisher-Price Toys in East Aurora, New York. That I knew. What I didn't know was that they were in legal proceedings to break their contracts with Burroughs because Burroughs was doing such a hideous job of implementing on the contract. Burroughs had the superior computer architecture, infinitely more effective and efficient, lower cost operation than anyone else, but absolutely miserable implementation. Basically trying to exploit the job of their excellent engineers, get off easy, which was never me. So Jess Fleming, the very kind district manager, who definitely thought extremely well of me, asked me to take over the account. I said, sure. My first day on the account, it may be that I've never felt more terror than I felt after getting briefed by the team there and understanding that the whole thing was headed off the cliff. My terror came from a selfish fear. It was clearly going to be the end of my career. It was an impossible situation to turn around. Dozens and dozens of paid Burroughs consultants on site doing software implementation. Good people. Hideously managed, hideously supported, hideous interface with the client. Jim Lasky, previously a senior chief executive officer with an IBM account. A great man. Well, it was clearly the end of my career. I was going to go down in flames. I hadn't been deliberately set up, but that's what had happened. The senior technical manager for Burroughs on site was Mel Dixon, who I had spoken with only briefly once or twice before, tall, lanky Midwesterner. And he and I sat down in his office, and I'm sure I said, or it was evident from what I was saying, Mel, this is done. There's no way this is going to happen. Now, I was not a coward by that point. It was not that there was a horrific situation. It was that it was so far gone. And I don't remember what he said, except it saved the account and it started me in a whole new direction in life. The words I remember were "the art of the possible," which I've Googled a couple of times in years past and found very little on as to the source. It's not him, but he delivered it at the right time. I'd never heard it before. And it took me to a part of my nervous system that I'd used, but never as powerfully and explicitly. Being an analytical, Dwight Eisenhower was an analytical. It's a personality type. Being an analytical as I am, I insist on understanding enough of the details, much deeper than most people, that I'm on bedrock. I get it. I understand why it's going to work. I understand why it will be horror if it fails. I understand how to connect the dots and get there and make it happen. Will not fail if we'll do everything to fix it. But in saying the art of the possible, it took me to the heart. It took me to the part of our nervous system that never tells us everything that it knows. It can see. It's the 80% of our brain Einstein said we didn't use. It can make sense of things, but we're too stupid to be able to hear everything it has to say. We just can't. We can't digest our 20% of the brain we can access directly. It can't digest, can't fathom the 80%, but it can listen. It can hear it. It can be nudged by it. And that's when my life of the heart began to really take off. And I was able to I was able to sense the whole picture. And in 3 months, the account was totally turned around, and I had my next promotion. I share all that because whereas I knew once I moved into that part of my nervous system, I began to see how to turn things around. I didn't get it. The point is that on complex situations, in the ways we can control information, we can plot out within ourselves from point A to point B how to do something. That was impossible in that situation. Hundreds of people involved, sites all around the country. There was no way in the hours and the days it was going to take to fix it that anyone could have plotted that out. But the heart could grasp it. It's not metaphysical, it's neurological. The heart could grasp it if you would listen, and I did. But I never understood what it understood in terms of the details. And so it is with what I'm sharing here. I ponder where this death fast is going. I will only ever be married to averting environmental Armageddon. That's the only given. I will from second to second recalculate the best way for me to serve that goal and do it. Whether it affirms what I've done and said before, whether it makes me appear a liar or a coward, I'll pay any of those prices. I will not pay the price of my next 100 billion children. With the last death fast, which turned out to be a weapons test. It's the first time death fast had ever been conceived of or used. At the very end, it became a weapons test. My calculation at the last days was, no, it's not best for me to exit physical existence right now. There's a book for me to finish, and there are a couple of hopeful souls that might need my guidance based on what the death fast has done to them and done within them, as it had done to me first, totally unforeseen by me. And without question, that was the right decision. In the few moments I've afforded myself to contemplate how this death fast will play out, and it will play out as I can best see how to serve humanity. The only given with me is that every second I've got will be used to best avert hell for my 2050s daughter. That's the only given that there will be as long as I've got a breath. But when I speculate on how this will play out, two things suggest to me why it will finish out with my pulse ending. Three things, actually. The first two being the most important. And they're very interrelated, but not the same thing. The best of us have no idea what it is to die for a cause. We live in such a cocoon world where the notion of dying is so removed from us. Yes, we're bathed in it on television. People even get killed in our midst, including a heroic policeman putting their bodies in the way, or firemen. But it's still so culturally removed from us. When we were pioneers, hunters, it was much closer. When we didn't have such advanced medicine, it was much more frequent that people would die. And they'd die in our homes, not in some remote hospital. Death was much more part of our life. We can't conceive of dying for a cause. And we need to learn how to conceive for it. Not many of us will have to do it, but a lot of us are going to have to offer it. And we can't conceive of it. I can. And that may be exactly the example that's needed of me. Yes, 99% of the people will have every explanation as to why I die other than why I've actually done it. Oh, he wanted to be a martyr, he was a whack job, he was a psycho, he was a cultist, a cult leader, he was frustrated, he was whatever. They're of no hope then, they're of no hope now. Left, right, and center. But the 1, the 2, the 5, the equivalent of what became the 30 freedom riders of the second wave, the best I've seen of them, at most one of them can imagine dying for a cause. It's inconceivable. I need to make it conceivable for them. Not desirable. Not, oh, I want to die. I don't have a death wish. I have a life wish. I want my next 100 billion children to have a life. That's my life. My life is them having a life. I want that life for both of us. But the second notion is that the power with which I need to fight may only exist at this point in time on the other side for me. No, I don't believe in a sentient God. Zero. And I don't believe that we can have a psychologically healthy, joyful life without living as though there is a sentient creator. Without living every second in front of a mentally conjured, mentally imagined, psychologically seen creative force, which certainly exists. A creative force certainly exists. But I don't believe in a sentient God. I don't believe that after one dies, that individual continues in a way as any sort of substance, except in the minds and hearts of others, as Jesus is totally alive in me, as Gandhi, King, Teresa, Romero, Rachel Corrie, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Dave Dellinger, are totally alive in me. There's nothing metaphysical about that, and there's nothing silly about that. It's been clear to me for years that the reason Jesus killed himself, it was certain death to ride into Jerusalem as he did at that time in the way he did. The reason he did it was he realized that those around him lacked the moral and intellectual imagination to get what he had been teaching, get what he had been saying, most importantly, get what needed to be done, to get what it means to give all for a cause. And to save the world was going to take giving all for the cause, to giving all for humanity, to giving everything that we have to the poor. He needed to provide the ultimate demonstration of that as an individual, with the notion that it might provide sufficient example of what a joyful life is all about. Paying whatever price is needed for the life of our human family. That's the only place that a joyful life is to be found. For a Teresa of Calcutta, it was a life that lasted many, many decades. For Jesus, it lasted 33 years. So what? Indifferent to the loving heart. All that mattered was Teresa saw she could best serve by doing it over many, many decades. Jesus saw he could do it by 3 years of ministry. Otherwise, irrelevant. We didn't walk out of the movie laughing in ridicule when Obi-Wan lowered his sword and had allowed Darth to exterminate his body. We didn't because we sensed a psychological truth to it. We got it. That Obi-Wan needed to joyfully pay the ultimate price so that Luke could see what the cause was worth to any sane individual. What a gift for Jesus to realize that he could contribute regardless of the way, he didn't care. He wanted to wake people up. There was nothing but a sense of joy in Obi-Wan when he lowered his sword. We got that. And there's nothing but a sense of joy on my part. That maybe for one, maybe for two, maybe now, maybe 100 years from now, they'll get it when I take my last breath or live out my years in a living death in St. E's Mental Hospital. And then the final, which only occurred to me as I started this video log. It's far from as important as the first two. But I'm not operating with a sense of hope that there will be 40 people here before I pass over, or the evidence that there would be 40 people here by early November. To stand until sane legislation is won, whether it's a month, whether it's a year, whether it's 3 years, that they will not go home. I'm not operating with a shred of hope that that's going to happen, and I'll never be without hope that it will be happen, but I'm not operating with a shred of hope that it will happen. I think they don't exist on the planet anymore. I think that we've become too subhuman. As I've said from the beginning of this death fast, if before I pass over, it is clear to me that 40 will be here, that they will not go home until the legislation is won, that they will keep their bodies in the way. And if they think, and I agree with them, I come to agree with them, that by me keeping a pulse, rebuilding, I can better serve alongside them than on the other side, then I suspect that's the choice I'll make. But I'm not living with a shred of hope that that will happen. I don't think they exist. It's neither here nor there. But centrally, the realization of the psychological power, not the mystical power, but the psychological power that Obi-Wan unleashed, that Jesus unleashed, in manifesting from their heart of hearts, from their true hearts, this is worth my life. May well be, no, this is worth the termination of my life. He would have preferred that he could serve as Teresa did, because he had many gifts to give. But no, what's needed from me right now is to remind the world that there is something that is worth the termination of our life right now. And there is, by God, the next 100 billion children. But we lack the moral imagination to see it. And by my passing, I might be part of re-exercising that imagination in others. Psychologically, not as a live spirit, but psychologically. What a joyful opportunity.